It started as a dull ache. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that made me clutch my stomach in agony. Just a nagging little knot that sat there. Right under my ribs, like it was daring me to ignore it. And I did. For weeks. I told myself it was just bad takeout or stress from work. I mean, who wants to be that person constantly complaining about their health? Especially in an office where even taking your lunch break makes you look like you're slacking. The first real wake-up call came on a Tuesday morning. Remember, because I was sitting at my desk staring at a spreadsheet and I could feel my hands trembling slightly on the keyboard. My face felt cold but clammy at the same time. You know that weird mix? Like your body can't decide whether it's freezing or burning up? I had my little mug of ginger tea, my so-called office. Remedy cradled between my palms. I kept telling myself, just get through the morning. Just until lunch. But by 10 a.m., my vision was going a little fuzzy. I leaned back in my chair, hoping no one would notice, and tried to breathe through it. That's when my boss walked by. Quick glance, polite smile, then his eyes narrowed slightly, like he'd spotted something he didn't like. "Everything okay?" he asked. But in that tone, that's less concern and more, "Are you about to become a problem for me?" I mumbled something about feeling a bit off, maybe a stomach bug. He gave this little shrug and said, "We're all tired." That was it. No go home, no take care of yourself, just we're all tired. Like I'd just told him my leg was broken and he replied, "Yeah, I've stubbed my toe before." I remember sitting there after he walked away, staring at my tea like maybe if I drank enough, it would wash away whatever was wrong with me. And part of me thought, maybe I should just keep my mouth shut next time. That's the thing about working. Somewhere where being sick feels like a weakness, you start hiding it, even from yourself. The first time I ever asked for sick leave was almost a year earlier. Same story, a mild fever, bad headache, and I'd called him early in the morning. His voice had that clipped, busy tone, like I'd interrupted something important. "How bad is it?" it asked. "Bad enough that I can't focus," I'd said, trying not to sound pathetic. There was a pause, then the sigh. Always the sigh. "Fine, but we've got deadlines. You'll make it up, right?" Of course I had. I'd worked late 3 nights in a row afterward just to catch up. Maybe that's why I didn't push back when the stomach pain started getting worse. I'd already been trained, not officially, but in all the little ways that tell you sick days are a favor, not a right. It hit me before sunrise. I woke up curled on my side, clutching my stomach like I was trying to hold myself together. Pain wasn't sharp. It was heavy, deep, almost suffocating, like someone had replaced my insides with a bag of wet cement. My mouth was dry, but my forehead was damp, and every time I tried to move, a slow wave of nausea rolled through me. I stayed still for a long minute, staring at the ceiling in that pale blue light you get right before the sun's fully up. The blinds were half open, stripes of shadow cutting across the room. I could hear the faint city noise outside, a bus groaning to a stop. A couple of early footsteps on the sidewalk below, but it all felt muffled, like I was underwater. My phone was on the nightstand, screen face down. I just stared at it. I knew what I had to do. But the thought of making that call made my chest tighten in a whole different way. Finally, I reached for it. The cold glass felt almost shocking against my palm. I opened my contacts, scrolled to my boss's name, and hovered there for a second, thumb trembling. What if he thinks I'm exaggerating? What if this is just something I should power through? But then my stomach gave a violent twist, and that was my answer. I hit call. He picked up on the second ring. Yeah, no hello, just that clipped tone. Already impatient? "Hey, it's me. I'm really sick this morning." Stomach's the sigh. That long, slow exhale that somehow says, "I don't have time for this." I froze for a moment, staring at the ceiling. I could almost picture him sitting at his desk in his pressed shirt, already irritated that his schedule might shift by an inch. "Fine," he said finally. "Get better. Da-da-da-da-da, but we're slammed today." It wasn't a question, but I still found myself whispering, "I'm sorry." I hung up, let the phone slip onto the blanket, and just lay there. The sunlight had crept a little higher on the wall, but instead of feeling comforting, it just made the room feel too bright. I pulled the covers over my head like I could hide. from both the pain and the guilt. And that's the worst part. I was lying there, barely able to move, but I still felt guilty. Like being sick was some personal flaw, some inconvenience I should have managed better. It's strange how quickly self-doubt seeps in. Maybe I should have just gone in. Maybe. Not that bad. Maybe I'm just being weak. I told myself I'd rest for a bit and then check my email, just to make sure nothing urgent was falling apart without me. Because apparently, even at my worst, I still couldn't imagine not checking in. I must have drifted in and out of sleep for most of the morning. My body felt like it weighed twice as much as usual, and every movement was a negotiation. I'd wake up for a few minutes, check the clock, then sink back into that hazy, conscious state where you're not really resting, just existing. It was a little after 1 in the afternoon when my phone rang. The sound jolted through me like a cold splash of water. I reached for it without even looking at the caller ID. Some part of me already knew it was him. "Hello." My voice sounded rough, like I'd been chewing gravel. "Yeah, listen, no small talk. No, how are you feeling? Just straight into it. We're gonna have to let you go." I sat up too quickly, and the room tilted. "Wait, what? You've missed too much time. We need someone we can rely on. This just isn't working out." His voice was steady, almost bored, like he was reading from a script he'd used a dozen times before. For a second I thought maybe I'd misheard, that the fever or the nausea was messing with my head. "You're firing me?" "Because I'm sick." Silence. "Then it's about reliability. You understand?" I didn't. Not in that moment. My mind was scrambling, looking for something to grab onto all the late nights. The weekends I'd given up, the times I'd covered for someone else without complaint. None of it mattered now. He ended the call with a curt, "HR will send you the details." And just like that, it was over. I stayed sitting there, phone still in my hand, listening to the empty hum of the apartment, the sound of traffic outside, a neighbor's muffled TV. It all felt far away, like I was watching life happen from behind a sheet of glass. Eventually, I pulled my laptop over. Part of me hoped it was some kind of misunderstanding. I opened my email, and there it was. Subject line, "Termination of employment." I clicked it open. But the words swam in front of me. I caught phrases like, "effective immediately," and "final paycheck," before my brain just shut down. The rest of the inbox was full too. Messages from coworkers, project updates, meeting invites I'd never attend. I sat there in the dim light of my living room, the screen casting a cold glow on my face, staring at an inbox that suddenly didn't belong to me anymore. And in that moment, it wasn't just about losing a job. It was the realization that I'd been disposable all along. I didn't move for a long time, just sat there with my laptop still open, the email glowing back at me like it was mocking me. I could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock, each second landing a little too loud in the quiet. Anger came first, sharp, hot, almost blinding. My mind started replaying every late night I'd stayed in the office when I could have been home. Every time I'd skipped lunch to finish something on time. Every weekend I'd just checked in to make sure a project was running smoothly. I'd given them more than my hours. I'd given them my energy, my health, my time. And for what? A 2-minute phone call, an HR template email. The anger burned for a while, but like any fire without fuel, it started to fade. Then came the numbness, that heavy, dull weight in my chest where all the heat had been. I leaned back into the couch and just stared out the window. The clouds had rolled in without me noticing, and now rain was sliding down the glass in thin, winding lines. On the table in front of me, there was still a half-empty cup of coffee from that morning, cold now, the thin layer of cream floating at the top like an oil slick. I picked it up, took a sip without thinking, and immediately grimaced. The taste was bitter, metallic, wrong. It hit me then. This was it. No going back, no last meeting, no chance to prove I was reliable again. I'd been cut out clean, like I'd never mattered. A flash of memory caught me off guard the night. I'd stayed until midnight helping him fix a presentation he'd completely botched. I'd gone over slides, rewritten whole sections, even. Ordered him food because he hadn't eaten all day. He'd looked at me and said, "You're a lifesaver." Funny how lifesavers get tossed aside the second they're inconvenient. I let out a short, humorless laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd that I'd believed loyalty was some kind of shield. If I worked hard enough, cared enough, they'd care back. But they didn't, and now. Sitting in my quiet apartment with rain tapping against the glass, I finally started to see it clearly. I wasn't part of a team. I was a tool. And when tools break, they get replaced. The rain kept falling, steady and unhurried, like it had nowhere else to be. I sat there, my thoughts drifting backward, replaying the greatest hits of my so-called team player career. It was amazing how easy it was to remember the nights I'd stayed late. Not because anyone asked me to, but because I thought it mattered. I'd watch the office empty out, the hum of voices fading, chairs rolling back, computer screens going dark one by one, and I'd still be there. Just me, the soft buzz of the fluorescent lights, and the faint smell of burnt coffee from the break room. I can still see myself hunched over my desk, half a sandwich in one hand, typing with the other, promising myself just one more hour. That 1 hour would turn into 3, and by the time I finally left, the janitor would be vacuuming in the hallway, giving me that look like you too. Then there were the times I covered for coworkers. Someone's kid was sick, I'd take their calls. Someone had a family emergency, I'd handle their deadlines. I never complained, not once, because I believed we all had each other's backs. And my boss, he had a way of making you feel like it was worth it. "You're one of my best," he'd say, clapping me on the shoulder. "I can always count on you." Those words used to make me feel proud, like I was seen, like my effort meant something. Now they just felt hollow. A cheap currency he handed out to keep people running faster longer. I wasn't one of his best. I was just one of the most willing to bleed for the job. I thought back to that big product launch last year, or the week before. I'd barely slept. We were behind schedule, so I worked through my own weekend plans, skipped dinners practically. Lived at the office. The night before the launch, he'd walked past my desk at midnight, holding his coat. He stopped, gave me that approving smile, and said, "You're a rock star." Funny thing is, I can't even remember if he said thank you. Sitting there now, I realized all those moments I thought were investments, were just withdrawals from a bank account I never actually owned. All the extra hours, the skipped lunches, the above and beyond, they didn't build me equity. They just made me easier to replace. And yet, back then, I wore those sacrifices like a badge. I thought they made me untouchable. Turns out, they just made it easier for him to cut the cord without looking back. Anger is loud. Bitterness is quieter, heavier. But somewhere in between the two, there's this strange clarity. That's where I found myself the next morning. I woke up still unemployed, still nursing the same dull ache in my stomach, but something felt different. The shock had worn off, and what was left was this stubborn urge not to just let it end there, not to give him the satisfaction of cutting me loose like I'd never existed. It wasn't about getting even. Not really. It was about closure. About leaving my mark one last time, in a way he wouldn't forget. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling aimlessly at first. News headlines, social media feeds, delivery apps, my thumb just moving without thinking. And then I landed on the homepage of one of those food delivery services. Bright photos of steaming noodles, crispy sandwiches, overstuffed pizzas. That's when it hit me. Not some grand revenge, not the kind of stunt that ends up in HR reports, just something poetic, a gesture he'd never expect. A farewell. Lunch for my dear, dependable boss on me. I pictured it in my head, him, sitting in his office, probably mid-meeting, getting a knock on the door. A delivery guy holding a giant bag of food, no note, no explanation. It's just an anonymous gift that would leave him wondering all day. Was it from a client, a coworker, or could it be from the person he'd fired yesterday? The thought made me smile, not a big, triumphant grin, just a small, quiet curl of the lips. The kind of smile that says, "Yes, that'll do. I didn't need to ruin his day. I just needed to remind him I was still in it, if only for a moment. I started scrolling through the options with more focus now. Something big enough to be memorable, indulgent enough to feel deliberate, maybe even a little excessive. The more I thought about it, the more the plan took shape. Each click and scroll sharpening the image in my mind. It was simple, clean, perfect. I wanted it to be perfect. Not over the top enough to scream revenge, but just noticeable. Something that would linger in the back of his mind for the rest of the day. So I started thinking about timing. Lunchtime, obviously, but not just lunchtime, meeting time. I knew his schedule well enough to guess he'd be in that standing. Wednesday, check in with the department heads right around noon. That's when he'd be at his most important, which made it the perfect moment for a delivery guy to show up at his door with a giant bag of food. I browsed through the options like I was choosing a gift for an old friend, except, not. Pizza, too casual. Sushi, too neat. Then I saw one of those overstuffed catering platters from an Italian place downtown. Piles of pasta, garlic bread still steaming in foil, enough salad to feed a small army. It was absurd in the best possible way. I could already imagine the scene. Knock at his office door, a confused glance toward the assistant. The smell of garlic and fresh bread filling the room. And him, standing there with a polite but puzzled smile, trying to figure out who had sent him. Enough lasagna to feed an entire staff meeting? The thought made me chuckle under my breath. I added a couple of desserts for good measure, tiramisu, cannoli, the works, and set the delivery note too. Leave with receptionist. No signature required. No name, no hint, just the food. When I got to the checkout page, I hesitated for a second, staring at the total. Not because I minded spending it, but because it felt like the moment of no return. My finger hovered over the place order button, the way it does before you send a risky text. I pictured his face again, that mix of polite confusion and faint irritation. My lips twitched into the smallest grin. I tapped the button. The confirmation screen popped up, and just like that, it was set in motion. My little act of poetic closure was officially on its way. The next day, I woke up without an alarm for the first time in years. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels almost foreign when you've been living in the constant hum of work. No back-to-back meetings, no urgent emails, just the faint sound of the fridge humming and the occasional car passing outside. I made myself a cup of tea. Not coffee, not today, and settled into the couch. I opened my phone, pulled up the delivery app, and there it was. My order scheduled for noon. The little countdown timer at the top might as well have been a movie prop. By 11:45, the tracker showed the driver had picked up the order. I zoomed in on the map, watching the little icon, a bright red scooter, inch its way across the city. Each turn, each block closer, felt like a tiny drumbeat. My phone buzzed. A friend I'd told about the plan sent a message. Is today the day? I replied with a single word. Yep. 3 dots appeared then. You're ridiculous. I love it. Another friend chimed in. Please tell me you'll get a reaction pic. I just sent back a laughing emoji. This wasn't about proof. This was about the moment. By 11:59, the driver was 1 block away. I could almost picture the scene now. The receptionist signing for the food, looking around for the sender, the giant bags being carried to his office door. It didn't feel spiteful. It didn't even feel particularly rebellious. It felt final. Like placing a period at the end of a sentence I hadn't wanted to write but had no choice but to finish. When the tracker showed delivered, I sat back and let out a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Somewhere across town, my old boss was unwrapping trays of garlic bread and pasta, probably with a room full of confused coworkers staring at him. And I was here, in my apartment, sipping tea, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. It was 2 days. Later, when I finally heard what happened, I was making lunch. Nothing fancy, just toast and eggs, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from a coworker I hadn't talked to since the call. Okay? Was that you? I froze for a second, my fork hovering over the plate. What do you mean? I typed back. though I already knew. The lunch. Yesterday. Giant Italian feast shows up for boss's name in the middle of the department meeting. No card, no note, just food. He looked so confused, like he couldn't decide if it was a gift or some kind of, I don't know, prank. He actually laughed, like this weird, awkward laugh, and then everyone just kept eating it. I read the message twice, a smile creeping in before I could stop it. I didn't need more details. That single image, him standing there, hands in his pockets, trying to act casual while a mountain of garlic bread sat on the conference table, was enough. I never admitted it. Not to my coworker, not to anyone outside the tiny circle of friends who already knew. That was the beauty of it. It wasn't about credit. It was about knowing that, for just a few minutes. I'd interrupted his perfectly controlled world without raising my voice, without sending a single email, without breaking a single rule. The last word, without saying a word, I took my plate to the small kitchen table by the window. The afternoon sun was spilling across the floor in long golden stripes, and for the first time in a while, I didn't feel heavy. I sat there, eating my lunch, thinking about how sometimes closure doesn't come from confrontation. Sometimes it comes from a simple, quiet act that lets you walk away knowing you ended things on your own terms. In the days after, the unfairness still lingered, a low hum in the back of my mind. I'd replay the phone call, the tone in his voice, the abrupt way he'd ended it. For a while, I kept asking myself the same question. What did all those late nights mean? All those weekends I gave up? The truth was simple. They meant nothing to him. That was the point. I had given too much of myself to someone who wouldn't have done the same for me, and the cost had been my time, my health, and my peace. Now, I wasn't going to make that mistake again. There was a strange kind of freedom in knowing exactly where I stood. No more hoping for loyalty from the wrong people. No more bending myself into the shape someone else needed. At the expense of my own well-being, one morning, I stepped outside into crisp, cool air. The city was just waking up, storefronts opening, buses rumbling past, sunlight spilling between the buildings. I zipped my jacket, took a deep breath, and started walking, not looking back, not for a second.